Well, hello everyone. It is Saturday evening now. But thank you for joining me on my third episode of the Site Crusader. So I've had pretty good success with viewership, like getting this thing kind of started off. So that makes me happy. That means people are tuning in, and I actually had people. So with the topic that we have today, which is PTSD. Um, a lot. I advertised it, and I had people DM me about it, and so I know that there's a lot of that out there, and and it takes courage to face it. So I really want to encourage those of you out there that do experience PTSD. Um, whether you're ready to talk about it or not, um, please just it, reach out if you have to. I know it's tough to deal with. I know it's tough to face, but if you have to reach out, please reach out. Or see your psychiatrist, go to counseling, talk to your church, because these things they're not easy, and we're going to discuss those today. So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. I think everybody pretty much knows that. It's kind of common for people in the military. But what we've learned is that those same reactions also apply to regular civilians as we go through life and deal with trauma and stuff like that. So the Mayo Clinic, which is always my go-to resource for information because they are very good at what they do. They define PTSD as a mental health condition that's caused by an extremely stressful or terrifying event, either being part of it or witnessing it. Symptoms may include flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, and uncontrollable thoughts about the event. So, just as it's defined, it's not always a direct thing towards you. You could witness it. People can't, the brain has a tough time accepting things that they even witness. So it doesn't have to be a direct trauma to you. It can be an indirect trauma to you. So we keep that in mind. I'm sure there's people out there that can say, yeah, I saw something and I see it all the time. I close my eyes and I see it. I think about it. And, that creates, that stressful situation that is tough to deal with. The Mayo Clinic goes on to say that most people who go through traumatic events may have a hard time adjusting and coping for a short time. But with time and by taking good care of themselves, they usually get better. If the symptoms get worse, last for months or years, and affect their ability to function daily, they may have PTSD. So you can have trauma happen to you, and generally a lot of times people can move past it in a short period of time, but what they're suggesting that if it goes on for a lengthy period of time, that is when it becomes a little bit more serious, and you need to at least go in and get diagnosed and talk about the issues and really start to sort those out. PTSD symptoms, so there are 4 of them. So you could have intrusive memories. So intrusive memories are like what they said in the definition. They're flashbacks, where you relive that traumatic event over and over and over again as if it's still happening. It's still fresh and new, which is that's a tough thing to get through when you can't stop seeing something over and over and over again. Intrusive memories also involve distressing dreams or nightmares about the events where people, you hear these stories about people that were in Vietnam or whatnot, and they wake up in the middle of the night and they're having night terrors and they're sweating, and they wake up thinking that they're there. So that's an extreme PTSD symptom. And you also have like unwanted, distressing memories of the traumatic event. So this is basically like what you go through in your mind as far as like recollecting the trauma over and over and over and over again in your brain. So the second symptom is avoidance, where you avoid places, activities, or people that remind you of the traumatic event. I do this all the time with the things that I've had to go through in my life, where I have several PTSD situations that occur. I do not. Um, I do not go in. I do not like being in large crowds because in my life, the trauma that I've been through, large crowds means something bad is about to happen. So I get very, very head on a swivel when I'm in a crowd of people because I'm looking for the danger all the time. Um, and probably both of my ex-wives can tell you that when I'm out in public with them, I am security guard all the time. And I'm always looking and seeing where everyone is at. Um, because I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get caught slipping. So that's something that I deal with. So I avoid danger, like the trauma that I've gone through. I avoid situations that remind me of that trauma because I automatically process that there's going to be danger there, even though generally there's not, or the danger that I've experienced in the past is not going to be there. But in my mind, I still prepare as if it is. Um, I go through it. Even if you go through relationship issues like my last marriage, it ended on like false pretenses. So like I go through and I I I I recollect like how I felt when I came home and she was gone. And I started going through drawers and I'm opening up empty drawers and like so I'm constantly like weary of opening up drawers in my house because I feel like there's going to be nothing in it. Um, or seeing like Saturday mornings, it was the day that I was the most excited about in my house and my family because I would get up early in the morning, I'd go to the gym and I'd come home and I'd start breakfast for everybody and I'd start cleaning the house. I'd do things that helped my family out like before they would even wake up. And so now Saturday mornings is a very like stressful like time for me because I don't want to go through I know I'm going to go through that memory and I don't want to. And so I tend to I've learned to change up my routine on Saturday mornings, where I do my own like coping mechanisms to deal with those things. Um, so I sometimes I don't want to. And thanks for jumping in there, Sarge. I appreciate that. Um, Definitely chime in and we'll discuss any of your situations whenever you want. So like I do avoid things that are going to remind me of some of my traumatic things. The third symptom is negative changes in thinking and mood, where you have negative thoughts about yourself or others of the world. I think that happens a lot when you go through trauma. You start thinking negatively, and I don't really. I mean, yeah, I lose hope in people because I feel like, man, if I've thrown my trust in this person out there and like I believed in them as I know where my loyalty of things is, and I'm expecting that same loyalty and they don't live up to that expectation, then I start to have negative thoughts about other people. I'm like, well, if the person um right, yeah, that's true, SARS. We have talked about this quite a few times. um for those of you who don't know, I went to school with the Sarge, so we go way back, long time. But we do think negatively of others. It's it's just something that happens because like for instance, in a relationship, when you're married and then you're betrayed, and then that's the person that you were the closest with, the person that you put the most trust in. So when you go through that betrayal and you go through that hurt, it makes you think, well, if the person I trusted the most isn't worthy, then no one else is going to be. And we have to break that cycle because just because one person hurt you, it doesn't mean everyone's going to hurt you. And that's a tough one to go through, because it takes time to let go of that. And that's something it's not easy to do. And you know what? So the Sarge brought up a really good point. Try to explain how you can love someone and hate someone at the same time. That's exactly what it is. When you love them, but man, you're so mad. You're so mad at the decisions that they've made because you know where you're at in your heart that you still love, but yet they didn't love you enough to stay, or they didn't love you enough to do this or do that. So it's a very, very difficult thing to go through and process, because you have to absorb reality and still dump, and you're dumping, these feelings that you had that were solid and in place. And it's not an easy thing to do. So the next one, you could have feelings of guilt, shame, or blame. I've gone through all that. Um, then there's difficulty remembering important aspects of the traumatic event. I've never really gone through that because I pretty much have like a photographic memory. So anything that I see, I remember, I retain it for the end of time. But there are people that they'll go through something so traumatic that it turns like real splotchy, and they'll discard certain parts of it or details. And they'll just remember the graphicness of whatever the trauma is. You could have feelings of being detached from family and friends. I do that. I will completely isolate myself, and I don't want to go through the shame of seeing my family and seeing my friends, knowing that they're going to automatically want to give me some support and sympathy over something that I've shamed myself over as a failure. So it's kind of like going home for Christmas after something happens and you have to do the walk of shame back to see your family, and it's just not something that is a comfortable thing to do, but it is a necessary thing to do, because you do have to accept that support back. And it is healing. It's healing, because once you get through that awkwardness and then you realize like, hey, my family is here for me and my friends are here for me, then you can start to rely on them again and start to build trust up into people again. You can have a loss of interest in activities you once enjoyed. I'm a very routine person. I don't know if it's like that for you, Sarge, or anybody else that's tuning in. But I stay to my routine and that's it. But staying busy is something that I do to avoid dealing with reality. So when I have my episodes, I just get busy, and then I just let it pass, let that trauma pass. The fourth symptom is you have changes in physical and emotional reactions. So like you could be like easily frightened or startled. Like you're just jumpy all the time because of, maybe you were mugged or attacked or assaulted. A lot of women go through that when they go through like the sexual assaults and things like that. And that's something that is going to be tough to break. And it's just going to take time. It's not an easy thing to do. And then you're always like on guard for danger. I'm all that. I do that all the time. I'm constantly assessing people around me, things around me. Where's the danger? I'm trying to find it. There's danger out there. Where's it at? And yes, Sarge, that is the fight or flight reflex. And everyone reacts to it differently. I was just watching Donald Trump speak, and he was talking about the gentleman that was killed at his rally when he was shot, and Corey Campitor. And so he did not flight. He did not have flight in him. He fought and he covered his family and he died for them. So that's one example that, that it's unfortunate that happens. But that's what, that's what heroes do. They don't run. Some people just don't have it in them to face, something like that. I'm not saying that everybody needs to jump in front of bullets or anything, but in the heat of the moment, it is what you are. Um, yeah, and you're right, Sarge. It is bad. It's not always a good thing when you're dealing with trauma and your trauma response is to fight. That happens a lot with people where they get backed into this corner and they feel like they're dealing with these traumas and they just feel like it's just pounding on them and coming at them and coming at them, and then your response is to fight, and that's when you start to cause problems for yourself. You could end up with legal issues and whatnot. So we definitely want to be able to regulate that response the best that we can. If you come out, and you're a fighter, just try to find coping skills that's going to help you um, tone down that impulse, that direct impulse that makes you want to fight. Whether it's breathing techniques or just like getting yourself out of the situation for a second so you can think clearly. I'm an impulsive person, so when I get like that, fight is an easy thing for me to do. So I've learned to just remove myself. I have to go into another room or just walk outside or just walk away altogether. Um, so it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're impulsive, because the fight is boom, it's instantly, and then now you're in a situation. So try to think ahead of the game. Yes, breathing and counting does work. Breathing is a great technique for so many different things. Um, I highly agree with that. I'm a breather, so if I start to get upset, I will start breathing, and it is a therapeutic breathing. So definitely breathing works. Thank you, Miss Gemini, for that. Um, Counting, I don't ever think to count. I don't want to count. I do numbers all day, so counting doesn't work for me. I hate numbers when I'm not at work. so, but the breathing definitely is a good therapeutic tool. Sometimes if you can just get that oxygen flowing back to your head, you'll start to your brain will start to process things correctly again, and that's kind of the science behind that. So let me see where I was at. The third one with physical and emotional reactions, you could have self-destructive behaviors such as excessive drinking or reckless driving. I think for a lot of people, excessive drinking, it seems to be like the American way of dealing with things, is where you just, well, I'm just going to drink. I'm just going to drink it off. I don't drink, so that's not an option for me. And I drive like an old lady, so reckless driving doesn't work for me either. But I do know that people will try to they'll mask their traumas with substances, which also leads into substance abuse. So you really want to be conscious of how if you're a drinker and you start drinking a lot, that's not going to help you deal with traumas. And we're going to get with the therapeutic interventions here in a little bit, but definitely pay attention if you're going through some shit. You definitely want to pay attention to your substance abuse potential, because that's going to open up a whole other can of problems for you. You could also have trouble sleeping or concentrating. That's me all day. I don't sleep. So if I do sleep, it's a miracle. I generally have a very, very tough time. Yeah. So Sarge just said that he drank and drove 120 miles an hour. So Sarge, we definitely have to get that under control. 120 miles an hour is very fast. No more drinking and driving for you. But then going back to the sleeping's a big thing. If you're not sleeping, then that's going to affect you throughout the course of your day, and it's going to enhance your negative response to things. And good job, Sarge. You don't drink no more. Me neither. So we're in the same boat. So that's good. Good job. But if we're not sleeping, we're having negative responses because we're fatigued throughout the course of our day. It's going to affect our job performance. Not getting good sleep is a bad habit to have. So when you're going through and dealing with PTSD, you're dealing with the anxieties of the PTSD. It's going to have a bad effect on you in all aspects of your life. You're going to hit your weekends. You're going to do nothing but sleep. It's going to enhance you're going to end up with clinical depression. So just with having bad sleeping patterns is going to cause a lot of different problems for you potentially. So you want to try to find ways to sleep. A lot of people will look for medications from their psychiatrist or from their counselors that is going to help them sleep, because that's a big problem. I will not sleep. If I'm depressed, I'm gonna be a whack job. Um, the next one is irritability, angry outbursts, or aggressive behavior. That's what we were kind of talking about with the impulses. That we have to be able to control these things. If you're starting to feel like you're angry and you're going through PTSD and you're dealing with some of these traumas from your life and it's making you angry, we need to reach out. There's crisis hotlines, and when the show's over, I will put them in the comment section. So those of you who don't know where to turn, I will send you in some good directions that will give you some relief. Talking about your PTSD is going to help with these things. There's your mind can only carry it so much before you have to dump it somewhere. So I would, build these relationships up, just like what we talked about in the first episode when the clinical depression. We want to build a positive relationship with someone, and have that person that you can have that mutual agreement where, hey, I need to dump this and I just need you to listen. And that's going to make all the difference in the world. And yeah, and so Sarge talks about that he doesn't do sleeping pills because it makes him foggy all day. And that's going to affect him. And so you want to really if you have to take medications, just learn to regulate yourself. Know what's working, what's not working. Communicate properly with your physicians. That way they can dial those in. We talk about dialing it in, especially when we did the ADHD episode last week. It's kind of the same concept. You want to dial that in, otherwise you're not going to be functioning correctly. Because when you have PTSD, you have brain imbalancing going on, and so the medications are going to be needed to help you get that balance back. So that way, all your receptors are firing on all cylinders. And Sarge brought up acceptance. Acceptance is big. So you have to have people in your life that are going to accept that, hey, I'm not okay, and I need you to accept that. And if you have a good group of people around you, like, I'm not a judgy person on people. If I don't like seeing people mentally struggle, so I encourage, like, my friends and my family, if they need to talk, I will listen. Um, I am not always 100% available all the time, but when I am, you can dump it all the time. Trina. I'm about to look that one up, Sarge. I'm not familiar with that medication, Trina. So if you have something you want to add to what that does, please throw that in there. So the Mayo Clinic says that these symptoms can vary in intensity and may come and go over time. And that I found that to be true in my life. I don't know if it's true for all of you out there, but I will have I'm okay, and then I'll have this traumatic event just hammer me like for 2 days straight, and it just beats me up. So okay, so that's a new med. Okay, so you have to let us know how that medication works out for you, Sarge, so that way I can. It's not the med name. Okay. Whenever you have more information, just let us know. That way I can know what I'm learning about here. But if you start to have some of these symptoms that we just talked about, I think it's always a good idea to try to seek out some medical assistance with that. Go talk to somebody. If you got to go talk to your pastor, most churches, they don't charge you for mental health, or it's something very, very little. I think my church is like $20. Which I use my clergy more than I use mental health professionals. That's just how I do it. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. I lean on my church for everything. So statistic wise, and just like how we talked in clinical depression in the first episode, for those of you who did not watch my episode on clinical depression and you want to get caught up on things. So we went through some statistics of clinical depression in that episode. And I found that I feel like the statistics are off. And it's the same thing with the PTSD. So, according to the Mayo Clinic, only 5% of adults are living with PTSD and 6% of Americans. So I don't agree with that. I don't know if that's right, or if it's just there's that many undiagnosed PTSD cases out there, because I can just about run into 10 people out there and 9 of them will have some kind of PTSD that they're dealing with. So I definitely think that those statistics are off, but that's just informative, I guess. It just makes me ask more questions. So we'll go into the parts of the brain, because this is my favorite part, because I'm a brain nerd. But PTSD has like 3 main parts of the brain that it affects. So just about every episode we've had, the amygdala is one of the top parts of the brain that's effective in mental health, and that is no exception here. Okay, so it gets thrown around with triggers. Yes, so we're going to talk about that here in a minute, Sarge. So this part of the brain is responsible, the amygdala is responsible for detecting threats and activating the body's fear response. Individuals with PTSD, the amygdala tends to be overactive. So we'll talk about that here in a second. And it leads to a heightened fear and anxiety. So it's you get overstimulated and you get overwhelmed, and it's just there's a lot going on, and your normal brain is not processing it fast enough. So boom, anxiety happens. And so you have to understand that when you start to get overwhelmed, that's because your amygdala is working overtime, and you have to find ways to slow that down, just slow that processing down. So this works with people with ADHD, like we talked last week. They get so overwhelmed that they can't process anything. I'm going to tell you, just like I tell everybody, what you want to do is just hyper focus on one thing that's floating around up there in your brain, and just say, this is what I'm putting on my plate right now, and that's all I'm focusing on. Put everything else on the back burner and start with something that you can easily solve. And just move down the line. Say, when I get that solved, then I'm going to pull the next thing out. I'm going to deal with that. It's a lot easier to do it that way. It's hard discipline wise. But once you can self-identify that these things are going on in your mind, you can start to regulate them, and you can say, okay, I'm going to deal with this. Now I'm going to deal with this. Now I'm going to deal with this. Instead of going, I have all 10 of these things fighting for importance in my brain, when I in reality, you can't solve all the problems at one time. So you have to learn how to compartmentalize. So the second part is the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, which is what they call it in the psych world. It helps regulate emotions and decision making. So here we have your emotional responses right here. So in PTSD, this area can become underactive, making it harder to manage fear responses and think clearly. So it's where you have something that happens, and you're not reacting quick enough, because you're it's like the freeze. It's where you're just frozen. You don't know what to do. So the prefrontal cortex is what slows your reaction time down. And then when you're going through PTSD, you just freeze. Yeah, I think a lot of people can probably relate to that, where you're going through something and you just can't do anything. You're frozen. It's like when you're a kid and you hear something in your room and there's nothing you can do. You're frozen. You think there's a monster under your bed or whatever. So it's kind of along those lines. The third part of the brain that it affects is the hippocampus. That region is crucial in memory formation and retrieval. PTSD can cause the hippocampus to shrink. So we talked about that in the first episode with clinical depression. Anytime that you're going through anxiety and things like that, your brain will react and it shrinks because it goes under stress. So it contracts a little bit. And that's where you start having like more issues. It may lead to difficulties in distinguishing between past and present experiences, contributing to flashbacks and intrusive memories. It's kind of like if I was to give you like a super sci-fi nerd it's kind of like teleporting your memory. You're going back and forth between past and present, past and present, past and present. And it makes it difficult to really like get your bearings about where you're at and what you're doing. And it's mainly just because that you're putting your brain under so much stress that it's shrinking and contracting. So like the maneuvering of transmitters, everything moving back and forth in your brain is getting contracted. So it's not going, things aren't getting to the right places at the right time when you're looking at neurotransmitters. So that's kind of how that works. The brain part, this is my favorite part to talk about because it's like right up my alley. I love brains. I'd be like Hannibal Lecter and just eat them. I won't do that. I promise. We'll have a whole episode about that. But treatment wise, so there's a lot of treatment. Therapy. So just like with, I think all three of them suggested cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT. It's very traditional forms of therapy. You go into any counseling and you're going to get CBT. So you'll go through CPT, which is cognitive processing therapy. So that's how we need to process when it comes to PTSD. You're processing trauma. So that's the first thing they're generally going to suggest to you. Not always, but generally. Like I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word as PhD. I'm just a guy who went to college for a long time. I don't know nothing about nothing. These are just helpful suggestions. So CPT helps patients modify and challenge unhelpful beliefs related to the trauma. So this is a big one for me because I believe in this form of therapy where you face it and you look it in the eye and you deal with it. There's times where I don't do it and I don't want to deal with it. But most of the time when times get tough, when I realize that my trauma is affecting my success, I eventually have to say, okay, put your big boy pants on and go look this thing in the eye and go, today you are not going to be a factor. And that's kind of how this therapy works. What is the trauma? Where are the roots of this trauma? Let's go back and find the roots. Most of the time, your PTSD is something very significant in your life. That's why it affects you so much. So you already know where the roots of the trauma is at. It's very easy to find. And then you have to pull it to the front and go and grab it by its shirt and go, okay, today you're not going to affect me. You're nothing. You're a thought. You're a thought that came in my brain. And I'm just like it came in the brain as a nothingness with no mass. I'm going to take it out because there's no mass. That trauma can't physically hurt you. And so let's take it out. Take that negative energy away. So those are things that you can do. It's more symbolic, but you definitely need to face it at some point. And there's a time and a place for it, and you'll do it at your comfort. And just however you deal with trauma, that's how you're going to deal with it. The second one is prolonged exposure therapy, is PE. So this is an interesting one, and I like it. I'm not. There are people that do use this. So it involves gradually confronting trauma-related memories and situations to reduce the fear and avoidance. So like if you're afraid of spiders and you're just terrified of spiders, maybe put a jar of spiders that sealed up and they can't get you. Put a jar of spiders like on your desk. Because if you're around them all the time, you're gonna deaden your traumatic fear of them. That's how this method works. If you're afraid of snakes, go see a pit of snakes somewhere and just be around them. That was an example I read about. This guy was terrified of snakes, but he loved to fish, and so he was always going into these like backwoods ponds that had a lot of snakes in them. So he would see them, and then he realized, like, look, if I just sit here and watch this snake for a while, then pretty soon he had deadened his emotions to his traumatic response to snakes. So it was a good therapy for him, and I think this is a good therapeutic method. Um, it just depends on what your trauma is. I mean, obviously, if it's something, if you're afraid of, getting drowned, I don't expect you to go drown yourself until you conquer your fear. It's not going to work like that. But within reality, if you have phobias of certain things, you can conquer your fears this way. So the next therapeutic method is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's the acronym EMDR. It uses guided eye movements to help process and integrate traumatic memories. That's going to be a difficult thing to do, and I would recommend that you all read up on that to see if that is even something that is going to be feasible for you to do. It's basically you're just looking at something and you're saying it's a nothing, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. Bro, my dog is just looking at me all kinds of weird, like it just like turned into another animal. Sorry about that. She was like kind of looking at me like all sideways with this cringy smile on her face. Whatever. The next one is group therapy. If you are comfortable talking about your issues in groups, I highly recommend group therapy, because you're going to find out that there are other people going through the same things, or they have already been through it and they can help you, or they're just starting it and you can relay your information to them. It's a big circle of where are you at in this process, and how can you help me, or how can I help you? And you all tend to heal. At this, you're going to eventually help each other heal. So I do recommend group therapy. It's a good way to deal with things and have people going through it as support people for you. Yeah, so Sarge, I'm going to have you on here. We'll go through PTSD again, because there are a lot, like I said, I had a lot of people reach out to me about their stories, but they just weren't comfortable talking about it online. So I'm going to, work with some of these people and, kind of help them and give them some suggestions on how to, start to get comfortable with their traumas. Because just hearing it from me isn't the same as hearing it from several people, and hearing it from people who are going through it or have already conquered it. And so just having a community of people that can relate helps people get through trauma. It's just like group therapy. Having this an open forum to talk about PTSD is a form of group therapy. So we want to keep these forums going and keep the safe space of the forums going for people that need help and that want suggestions on help. So medications, the Mayo Clinic has 3 suggestions for medications. They have antidepressants, which is it's a good thing to have, because when you go through traumatic responses, it does kind of drag you down. You start to feel depressed, like you don't know what to do. You're confused. You start to not know what's real and what's not real, how to make these things stop. So antidepressants is a good way. They suggest like Zoloft and Paxil, and just serotonin inhibitors, things like that. Zoloft is something that I'm used to. I've been on Zoloft before. It does kind of get me to where things don't, kind of takes the bite off of trauma. I don't want to say it makes it okay, but it does take the bite off of it, where it's not like I'm not getting hit with it, like getting punched in the face with it, but it's just kind of like a love tap. But it doesn't take away your problems, but it takes away the effect of it. So I have, gone through psychotropic medications before, and I've had success with some of them. Some of them I haven't. But it's just how your body reacts to things at the end of the day. They also recommend anti-anxiety medications, which would be like benzodiazepines. It's a short-term method, and hopefully that if your anxiety is going on for longer than 2 weeks, then we're looking at a whole other different problem. So if you're just going through a PTSD spell where you're going through something and it's only going to last a couple days, you can take the benzos, and then you're generally going to be okay. You're going to let that pass until the next time. The next one is prazosin, which is that's supposed to help with your sleep and reduce your nightmares. It kind of calms down some receptors that affect your sleep. And it'll kind of help you, get some relief at night. Then there's also your self-care and support. So they always suggest healthy lifestyles, which I try to keep a healthy lifestyle. So that's something that I think is important. I think when you start living a healthy lifestyle, I exercise every day. I eat right. Sleep, sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. But if you start to live healthy, you're going to start having, healthy, mental health. They kind of go hand in hand. When you go into the gym and you just release those endorphins, and you get your blood flowing and all the oxygen's getting where it needs to go, and you're starting to break up some of the, getting all these toxins out of your skin, because the sweat's going to push all the toxins out. And I think that's highly important. I think when it's like a cleansing, you're naturally cleansing your body, and you're getting your circulation moving how it's supposed to. And that's going to make you think clearly. So I think healthy lifestyle is very important. Support networks. So you want to engage with your family and friends, or your support groups, your support people, to provide emotional support and reduce your feelings of isolation. I always want to isolate, so I do need to find ways to, let people in. And I generally want to put walls up, not let anybody in my emotional square, and I deal with it. And it's completely a healthy thing to do. So once I start to realize, like, hey, I'm walling everyone off, I'm not letting anyone in to be there for me, then I start to say, okay, I need to, let my support people in on these situations. So I definitely, if these PTSD situations, and I know we go through this a lot, with, former military, like the suicide rates high with people who have seen combat or seen these things. Police officers, they have high suicide rates. And then people who have been through, assaults, sexual assaults, things like that. We need to, make sure that if you're starting to have these thoughts of suicide, and you're not dealing with your PTSD, that we need to make sure that you're reaching out. And if you're a family member and you're starting to see signs, that you need to, sit down and talk to your loved ones and make sure they're okay. Reach out to people and say, hey man, are you okay? I'm here for you. Let's sit down and talk. I'll listen. All you got to do is talk, and I'll just listen. And just show that support to people. That'll go a long ways. A lot of people, when they get into these modes, they don't know what to do, and they don't think anybody cares. So like I said, I'm going to put all the prevention sites up on the, in the comments once I log off. But feel free, if you guys, for those of you that have my Facebook, if you want to talk, if you need somebody to listen to you, I will listen. Hit me up in my DMs. I'm always here to help. And I hope everyone has a good weekend. That is going to be the end of the show for today. Everybody stay safe, and just have a good weekend. All right, I'm out.